I'm wondering what the rest of us are gaining from this.
Well, and it isn't just about the individual. I think also rule of law in general. There's broad leeway in how you prosecute something. The Department of Justice chose differently when it was investigating Hillary Clinton. They had a lot of people, up to and including Hillary Clinton, on false statement charges. If you read the Inspector General report that looked at that investigation, they knew they had Hillary Clinton on making false statements. She was never charged with a crime, even though she could have been. And this isn't even mentioning that she could have been charged with all sorts of crimes with how she handled her classified information. So you want to not just have fairness in how you handle an individual investigation, but across different investigations. When you see that one group of people gets away with anything, no matter what it is, and another group of people gets brought up on process charges when we were promised, quite dramatically, treasonous collusion with Russia to steal the 2016 election. And that's not a good situation.
I mean, one of the costs here is the cynicism this engenders in all of us. I mean, we don't believe in the system anymore.
Well, I mean, there's a reason. We've talked about how in other countries they find the man and then they find the crime. They decide someone's guilty and then they figure out how it's done. That's not how we're supposed to do it in this country. We're supposed to start with a crime and then work back from there.
Yes.
And that is not, I mean, in this case, we can see they're going after people who supported Trump. It doesn't even matter in the end how much they charge them with, because the real problem is that they've had to spend all this money defending themselves. They've made it so that it's hard for people to stand up and align
I know a lot
Trump
of them personally, and I know that they've been destroyed by it, and no one seems to care. I care. Thank you very much. Well, the Central American migrant caravan is a myth. You've heard that many times. One reporter went to find out for himself. He investigated it, and we'll show you what he uncovered after the break. Also, more on the Florida recount and the associates that Hillary Clinton sent down to influence it. Hillary Clinton is back. We've got details. Well, the migrant caravan is fake. You've been watching CNN, so you know that. Look at this graphic, quote, invasion, unquote, then the word myth on the screen. It's a myth! A pernicious one, too. Is it actually a myth? Well, filmmaker Ami Horowitz decided to find out himself. He went to Mexico looking for this fake caravan. He found a real caravan, and he filmed it. Here's part of what he found.
Despite the framing of the caravan as being full of women and children, the reality on the ground is quite different. Approximately 90 to 95% of the migrants were male. The major narrative being pushed by the press has been that the migrants are leaving Honduras because they're escaping extreme violence and that their lives are under constant threat, setting up the strategy that they would be able to enter the U.S. by asking for asylum. So I started by asking them a simple question. Why are you coming to America?
¿Por qué quieres irte a Estados Unidos? Bueno, voy buscando una mejor vida económica. Venir a trabajar aquí a Estados Unidos. A ver si podemos trabajar allá porque en Honduras no hay trabajo.
There's a massive logistical effort underway, akin to moving an army, and is clearly costing someone millions of dollars for the transportation, food, water, medicine, and services that are being provided for the members of the caravan. The Mexican government also seems to be sending police to escort the dozens of buses and trucks that are ferrying the migrants and supplies along the route to the next destination. Ever present among the thousands of migrants are workers of Pueblo Sin Fronteras, clad in black t-shirts and colored vests. Pueblo Sin Fronteras means people without borders. They're the ones that seem to be most involved in organizing and mobilizing this caravan. The organization, as the name implies, is looking to create a world without borders, which seems to be one of the reasons why they organized this caravan in the first place, to flout American sovereignty. While it does seem as the majority of these migrants are friendly and simply trying to make a better life for themselves and their families, there's an undeniable element of the migrants who are violent and dangerous. And many of the migrants know this, and some have experienced it.
En el viaje hemos recibido agresiones verbales, físicas.
It seems to me that there are leftist organizations that are using these migrants as a tool to push a certain political agenda, which includes the weakening of American sovereignty and our border security. And unfortunately, these migrants are going to be caught in the crossfire.
Ami Horowitz joins us tonight. That was really interesting. The thing that jumped out at me was how, as you said, well organized it was. Do we have any sense who's paying for this? I know we're not allowed to speculate, but do we know that answer?
We don't. We know, what we do know is this whole thing cost millions and millions of dollars. And the mainstream media, and there's so many layers to this onion to peel back, it's hard to know where to begin. But one of the lies, the fake news, if you will, that the mainstream media is trying to propagate is the fact that this is all this weird, this organic thing, and all the water and the food and the medicine all dropped from manna from heaven. It's baloney. It's all highly organized. It's paid for by a number of organizations. We don't know exactly where the money is coming from. We do know that Pueblo Sin Frontera, which is the main group which is organized this caravan, has a couple of front organizations in the United States. And the money is flowing from them to Pueblo Sin Fronteras. We know there are some leftist groups. I know it's forbidden to say that Soros is part of it, but Soros has in fact funded at least some of those groups in the past. So we don't know where the money is exactly coming from. We know it's not coming from Honduras.
So why would, I mean, it's such an interesting and obvious question. Who's paying for this? Why haven't other news organizations gotten to the bottom of this? You're one man. You're doing this independently. Why isn't NBC News or ABC or PBS, why aren't they on this?
Oh, come on. You know the answer to that. They don't want to get to the bottom of it. They have no interest politically in getting to the bottom of it. It's the same reason why when you see a photo in the New York Times, the Washington Post, or a video in CNN or the BBC or MSNBC, what do you see? You see the entire framing are women and children, when the reality is so far from the truth. 90 to 95% of all the people who are in this caravan are men, although I do apologize for assuming their gender.
They're liars. That's the answer. That's why they're not reporting it in New York, because they are liars. I mean, thank you for that. That was valuable and really interesting. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Well, there's a huge debate right now over the question of nationalism. Some people say the word itself ought to be banned, struck from our vocabulary, but why? What is nationalism? And why is it bad to put America first if you're leading America? We'll take that question up after the break.
You know, they have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist.
Not too long ago, it wouldn't have seemed strange for an American president to call himself a nationalist. Lincoln was a nationalist, so was Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, all very successful presidents. But this president's critics say it's not just wrong to call yourself a nationalist, it's immoral. And the French president agrees, Emmanuel Macron, who, by the way, has copied the style and, to some extent, the substance of Charles de Gaulle, a nationalist French president. But whatever, he attacked Trump by bashing nationalism. Why has this become a theme? Putting your own country first is not allowed. We'd like to get to the bottom of it. Jim Kessler is Senior Vice President for Policy at Third Way, and he joins us tonight. Jim, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you.
So, sincere question. So, nationalism, there have been people who've claimed the title of nationalist who've had all kinds of creepy agendas that normal people, including me, would disavow, of course.
Absolutely.
But strictly speaking, the definition seems a common sense one. A leader of a nation state puts the interests of that state above the interests of other states. Why is that bad?
Of course. I mean, of course, a leader is going to put the interests of their own country ahead of others. That's not nationalism. Nationalism is a loaded term. I mean, the definition of patriotism is I love my country, and nationalism is I hate your country. That's what it certainly has become.
Really? When did it become that? I'm like, who came up with the idea that that's the definition? I missed that.
Well, the definition of nationalism, especially when you're in the European context where President Trump made that statement, is the nationalism that engulfed Europe in the 1920s and 1930s. The Nationalist Socialist Workers' Party, that's the N for Nazi, is there.
Okay.
And that's loaded, and he knows that.
But hold on.
Okay.
Hold on. Gandhi was a nationalist, okay? So the leaders of almost every nation state in history up until about 20 minutes ago would describe themselves, and did, as nationalists. So I get what you're saying, but it seems a little too glib and pretty unfair. Let's address the substance of it. So we have all kinds of multilateral agreements with other countries. A nationalist would look at those agreements and say, I want to make sure that my country doesn't get hurt in this agreement.
Absolutely.
The Kyoto Accord, for example.
Yes.
But that's not the way that our leaders who benefit from a borderless world, the finance community, for example, which has gotten so rich, doesn't benefit from that. And so they attack the idea of the nation state. Why would it be wrong to push back and say, no, the United States shouldn't get shafted?
Oh, of course. Look. If the definition of nationalism was Gandhi's nationalism, we wouldn't be having this discussion.
It was American nationalism, Roosevelt's nationalism.
Ronald Reagan never used the term nationalist. He used the term patriotism. And especially Donald Trump is using this as a weapon. He's using this as separating this
separating
nation.
Who? I don't know. From other nations? Why would that be bad?
So certainly in the European context, everyone knows that nationalism is what led to the rise of Nazi Germany. And when he says that the French are nationalism,
throwing the Nazi thing out again. But hold on,
well, that's where he did it.
No, he did it also in this country, and I'm doing it here because I think it's important to have an adult conversation. Sure. Not one where you win by innuendo. Oh, the end of Nazi is national. Okay, fine. But sincerely, I don't understand why the average person living in any nation state wouldn't want his leaders to put his interests above those of other countries. And we don't, consistently we don't. Well, and I can give you 10 examples, and you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely. And look, of course you want your leaders to put the interests of your nation ahead of others. That's what nationalism is not that. Nationalism is basically saying our country is always right. There are other countries, they are always wrong, and it is to separate us from other countries, and he is using that term as a weapon. His strategy is always to divide and conquer, and that's what he's trying to do with nationalism.
Okay, but I guess that you're coming at this believing that all countries must be united somehow.
No, there are countries, of course, are going to have conflict.
But what unites Americans? So if not a shared loyalty to the country they live in.
Melting pot, national identity.
Right.
Those are important things.
Well, but what would be more important than that? Like, so what does hold this country that doesn't have a common race or religion or history? And that's all fine as far as I'm concerned. But what does hold us together, if not nationalism?
A common set of ideals and beliefs, and belief in democracy, and a belief in pluralism, and a belief in the American dream and being inclusive. And I think those are the American values, and those are not nationalist values.
Well,
nationalist values are basically separating into sort of the in-group in this country and the out-group in this country.
But maybe you're misunderstanding the term. So nationalism, by definition, includes everyone within the nation. It does not exclude fellow American citizens. It unites them. And at a time when the left is hell-bent, as you know, on dividing us by race, which is the basis of...
I disagree with that.
Well, no, but identity politics is... The whole concept is we owe our first allegiance to our tribe.
So
and that's obviously
I am a melting pot.
Amen. Democrat. I knew you were. Okay. Good for you. And we agree on that, certainly. But at a time when we are divided by tribe, why wouldn't nationalism be the answer to that? We're all in it because we're Americans.
So here's my question then. H.W. Bush wouldn't say it. Bill Clinton wouldn't say it. George W. Bush wouldn't say it. And Barack Obama wouldn't say it. But President Trump said that, and he said it in a European context.
That's the argument? That Bill Clinton and George W. Bush wouldn't say it?
And Ronald Reagan wouldn't say it?
You're not winning me over.
Well,
that's not an argument.
Because you don't want...
observation.
Okay, it's an observation. Because that word is now a loaded term based on what happened in the 1920s and 30s, and you know it. Nationalism is not the benign, Teddy Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln nationalism.
Let's reclaim that word, because it's been 80 years, and we defeated the Nazis. Americans died to defeat them.
Yes, we defeated Nationalist Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis.
We defeated the Nazis, and that has nothing to do with what we're trying to do now, which is
So do you think when Donald Trump was talking about nationalism in France and to Macron, he didn't know what he was doing and referring to the nationalist uprising in 20s and 30s?
Himself a nationalist, whatever. We're out of time. I hope you'll come back, because I think it's an interesting
I would love to.
Conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, just when you thought the Florida situation couldn't get any weirder, a former presidential candidate from last time around got involved. What is her plan? We'll tell you after the break.